Imagine spending 25 grand on a wedding.
I had a guest list of 100.
Marrying yourself. Were you a bridezilla?
Only at the rehearsal.
Were you afraid you weren't going to show up? Saying I do to yourself.
If you want to celebrate yourself, that's great. I just think there are other ways to do it.
That's not your business.
This will lead to people marrying multiple people, marrying animals.
When I listen to you, I just feel like really tense.
Hey, my name is Danny, and I married myself on December the 10th, 2022.
Will you commit to never giving up until your dying day? Do you promise to give yourself grace? Do you commit to praying and finding the answers within yourself? Do you promise to value yourself?
Yes, I do. I overcame a lot of trauma, and it inspired me to marry myself. I realized I wasn't living for myself, and this wedding was my chance to start over. I spent $4,000 on my wedding. I had 9 bridesmaids.
I'm not the only one getting married today. You are too. So there is a bag in your chair with a ring in it.
At my wedding, I asked everyone else to marry themselves too.
I now pronounce you married to yourself.
People not treat me differently. They're thinking like, ooh, she can afford her wedding on her own. She's confident, she loves herself. That's right.
I say this to you, Danny, and to all of your guests. Let no one separate you from the love of yourself.
There is no such thing as overdoing celebrating yourself. Some people buy themselves a bag. Some people buy themselves a nice cruise. Me, I gave myself a wedding.
It's about the power invested in me as your friend. I now pronounce you a married woman. You may now kiss yourself.
Okay. Congratulations.
Thank you, Dr. Phil.
This was a big thing.
It was a serious
How much
thing.
did you spend on it?
Only the price of 4 Beyonce tickets, $4,000.
Did you have as much fun as a Beyonce concert?
I haven't been yet. Hopefully I'm on the list. But yes, I have a lot of fun.
Okay. So why do this? Because the fact that you love yourself, 100% would support. I mean, the fact that you would make that declaration to yourself, that you would make that declaration to others, that you would live that way, that you would embrace self-love, taking care of yourself, making yourself a priority. Everything that this seems to commemorate for you, I think is great. And I think it's wonderful that you would treat yourself that way. But why do you need this to commemorate that?
I grew up going to weddings my whole life, and I was taught that they were about love, joy, commitment, so I wanted to show that and share that with my family and my friends.
Did you doubt that in yourself?
Before, I experienced a lot of traumatic things growing up and in my younger days, and so I didn't always have self-love. I didn't always give myself everything that I needed. And I went on this long therapeutic journey. I stopped drinking, stopped having sex, and I said, now it's time. I went to therapy. It's time to marry myself. I have something that I've never had before, and my cup is full.
My name is Sasha Kagan. I'm a life coach, and I've been studying self-marriage for 20 years. I decided to marry myself at 40 because I wanted to do something meaningful and really pledge to love myself no matter what. I got married with a small group of friends. I got married to myself in the Japanese gardens in Buenos Aires. I got my self-engagement necklace the day of at a gas station. My self-marriage cost about $100. In my work as a life coach, I have had the pleasure of officiating about a dozen self-marriage ceremonies. I do not believe that self-marriage is selfish. In fact, I believe the opposite, that the more you take care of yourself, the better you will be for everyone else in your life.
Well, we're back talking about self-marriage. You just saw my next guest, Sasha, talk about why she chose to marry herself at 40. And she's not alone. Last segment, we spoke with Danny, who proudly said, I do, to herself on her 30th birthday. Now, in response to criticism about self-marriage, Danny says, well, why wouldn't you want to celebrate yourself? I agree with that. It's just some people say, why go to this level of having a ceremony? Does that make a mockery of marriage to another person. And so some people just don't agree.
I'm John McEntee, the founder of The Right Stuff, the dating app for conservatives. The mission is to bring people together that have shared values. The biggest deal breaker in the past when it came to dating was always religion, but now it's political affiliation. Marriage is a sacrament. I think the overwhelming majority of conservatives believe that it's a relationship between a man and a woman, but I know all conservatives believe it is between two people. I feel like self-marriage is not a real thing, and I feel like it's making a mockery of a very sacred thing. I think it's just probably a cry for attention. If you're marrying yourself, you're being very self-centered. People are too focused on themselves. If they were more focused on their relationships with other people, more people would come into their life. They would have more opportunities with relationships. I think a lot of people in society don't want to put in the work. We need to encourage people to have children in the country. I'm in favor of women in the workforce, but I also think when it comes to marriage, I think people are waiting too long. Right now, people think they can just name something and that defines it. If I'm playing in the backyard with my nephews, we call it the Super Bowl. That doesn't make it the Super Bowl. And calling polygamy a marriage does not make it a marriage.
Well, joining us is John McEntee, the founder and CEO of The Right Stuff, a dating app for conservatives. And also joining us is Sasha Kagan, a life coach with a focus on women over 40 and author of Quirky Alone, a manifesto for uncompromising romantics, who has been studying self-marriage for over 20 years and has actually officiated over a dozen self-weddings. So thank both of you for being here. Now, John also served as the director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office during the Trump administration. You've got a problem with this. What's your problem with it?
My problem is that it's making a mockery of a very sacred thing. I think if you want to celebrate yourself, that's great. I just think there are other ways to do it.
Yeah.
That's not your business.
Just spit it out. Just tell it what you think.
I just think that you're like deeply invested in how people like celebrate themselves, and that's why people are doing it, because I think that self-love allows us to give to our communities. When you have a full cup, you have extra to give. And so I don't think that you can put a limit on how me, you, Dr. Phil celebrates themselves. We didn't spend your money.
Right. Yeah, so I think there's some institutions in this country that we're very quick to tear down without realizing why they're there in the first place. I think 10 years ago, conservatives were called crazy when they said, this will lead to people marrying themselves. This will lead to people marrying multiple people, marrying animals, marrying objects. And I think we just have to be very careful with how we're using terms and what we're defining as marriage. And yeah, it might not be my business how you spend your money, but I think we as a society have created a certain structure, a certain way for a certain reason, and we need to just slow down.
I think people are more self-centered now. I think it's a huge problem. I think what conservatives have said was going to happen is happening. They said, people are gonna start trying to marry multiple people. People are gonna try to start marrying themselves. People are going to try to start marrying animals. People are going to try to do all these things if we don't have a definition of what marriage actually is. And unfortunately, some of that is coming true. It's very disturbing, and I hope we can reverse this trend.
We're talking today about self-marriage or sologamy. And you know what this brought back to me in thinking is, because I've said forever, Robin and I have been married for 47 years. We've been together for over 50, and I've always said that one of our secrets to success is not trying to change each other, because I've always said the last thing I want to do is be married to me, and really, because I don't want to be married to somebody like me. I don't want to turn over and I don't want to roll over and look at me in the morning or listen to me all day. I want to be married to somebody completely different. Danny says she married herself at 30, Sasha at 40. My next guest, Sonia, at 50. Take a look.
We are gathered here today to witness something we can all agree is revolutionary.
My name is Sonia, and I married myself for my 50th birthday on August 13th. I wanted to marry myself because I had the business, I had the home, I had the car. The only thing I didn't have was the marriage.
Here we are today with Sonia being an innovator, reminding us to celebrate Black women loudly. It is important to commit to ourselves.
I had a guest list of 100. I had 2 wedding planners, I had 7 bridesmaids and a best man. It was the wedding minus the groom.
You are the evidence that the Black woman is the closest thing to God we have, and you deserve to be celebrated loudly.
Why did you wait so long to do it?
Well, I knew when I turned 50, I was gonna do something symbolic for my 50th birthday.
Yeah.
And when you turn 50, you've reached a milestone. I have the business, I have the house, I have the kids. What I don't have? Haven't been married. So I'm gonna commit to myself.
You spent a lot of money on it.
I spent a lot of money. It was either get married for your 50th birthday or get a tummy tuck. I chose to get married.
So you spent $900 on your dress and $700 on a DJ, $5,000 on food and beverage, and then 2 planners just helped, right?
Yeah, they were my friends.
Yeah, and then they had 120 guests, and then you had 12 in the wedding party.
I did.
Yeah, so this was a blowout.
Yeah, it was a wedding. It was a fairy tale wedding minus the groom.
I'm glad I'm not in a serious relationship right now because I didn't have all the love that I needed to give myself before, and now I'm just pouring into me. One time I was on a date with this guy and I told him that I was married to myself, and he said, I do not want to be in a relationship with someone who is married to themselves. So, you know, he thought I was crazy, and that's okay. Next.
Next. We're back talking about self-marriage, a trend that many say promotes self-love and empowerment. Sasha says the younger generation is approaching relationships in a different way. But my next guest says that's one of the biggest problems in America today. Joining us virtually is the director of the National Marriage Project and professor of sociology at the University of Virginia, Brad Wilcox. Now, Brad is also the author of the upcoming book, Get Married: Why Americans Must Defy the Elites, Forge Strong Families, and Save Civilization, and has been studying marriage for over 20 years. Brad, thanks for taking time to talk to us today.
It's good to be here today, Dr. Phil.
We do know in looking at certainly the young generation today, they're dating later in life. They're getting married less than previous generations. Why do you think that's true?
Well, I think we have this sort of idea out there today that marriage is about basically, a capstone, and you've got to get all your ducks in a row in terms of, your career, your relationship, and everything else. And so folks are kind of postponing marriage in many cases, postponing kind of the pursuit of marriage in many cases. I think also it's the case too that a lot of folks have very high expectations for, a spouse, and so it makes it harder to find someone who would kind of meet the bar for them in this cultural context. And the final thing that I would say is we're seeing more challenges with men. A lot of young men today are not working full time. They're not really kind of fully engaged in their relationships. They're spending too much time on the Xbox. And so there's a kind of a malaise among some young men that also, I think, is part and parcel of why we're seeing this dramatic retreat from marriage unfolding in American life today.
And you say that it's really, the institution of marriage has really collapsed since the 70s. How much?
So the marriage rate's fallen by 60% since 1970. And this is, we're kind of in uncharted territory here with low marriage rates and low fertility rates as well here.
60% since the 70s?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you have a story or a question for me? Click the link in the description and tell me what in the world is going on.